You want to design a deck of cards, but you have no idea where to start and how to go about actually making your idea, your vision for a deck of cards into a reality that people can hold, that people can shuffle and play with and do magic with and cardistry. In this video, I'm going to be talking about my design process, and I don't want this to come across like it's set in stone, that this is a tutorial and this is exactly what you must do. I'm going to be talking about mine, but you can do whatever you feel's best. If something I say in this video simply won't work for you, then yeah, don't do it. It just worked for me, and that's why I'm telling you. And a really important disclaimer, I'm going to be talking about the actual creative process of designing a deck of cards, not actually funding it. I'm currently trying to fund a deck of cards at the moment on Kickstarter. I'll link a couple of videos that I found helpful about Kickstarters in particular, but obviously I can't talk about that because mine is currently being funded. And of course, to help, I'm going to be using the deck of cards itself. This is the Dystopian deck of cards. I want to start by saying, and I don't want this to put anyone off, but making a deck of cards is not easy at all. Obviously, when I went into this process for the first time, it was the first time. I was a newbie, so I made a few mistakes along the way. I'm going to talk about those as well. I'm also going to talk about why I really designed this deck and the sort of meaning of it. So I want to start with the actual idea itself, because that's the most important thing, right? If you don't have a good idea, then it's not going to go from there. Honestly, my number one piece of advice is going to sound really, really cliche. I almost don't want to say it, but it's to believe in your idea. If you have an idea for a deck of cards, you need to be really passionate about it. Maybe it's not a fully fledged idea either. You don't need to start with something that's a final product. You can start with anything. It can just be a colour or a shape. Maybe you don't know what the colour will be, but you have an idea for a back design. Just draw it. Just get some pen and paper and just sketch down quickly what the idea is. And yeah, it'll be rubbish. And in fact, yeah, I think it's here. This is it. This is the first, oh my god, this is the first drawing of the Dystopian deck back design. Look at that. It's literally just black and white. I just took some Sharpies and drew it down and wrote back design. It didn't have a name, it didn't have any of the shapes that you see on the final back design, but you can see it start to come through. That's meant to be a watchtower, believe it or not, and that's meant to be barbed wire, and obviously it looks nothing like this, but you can see what I was thinking. Do more drawings, more details, and try other things. Even if you think, ah, well, that probably won't work. Just draw it, just see. It might work, you never know. And design process with anything is trial and error, and with a deck of cards, I think the more trial you give it, the more chances it will have of succeeding. So yeah, that is literally the first drawing of the Dystopian deck. I did some other drawings, which I've also found. This is a little concept art that didn't work. I didn't really like it, but I drew it. That's meant to be a beam of light coming out of the watchtower. But yeah, I just didn't like it. I didn't think that would work. And ultimately, when I spoke to designers, yeah, they didn't really like it either. And so that idea got swept aside. But if I hadn't have drawn it, if I hadn't have tried it, I wouldn't have known. So again, it's all about trial and error. And if we take a look at the final back design, obviously it's dark red, and there's no hint of dark red yet. It's sort of, I've shaded it in to see if, you know, I like the idea of grey, and yeah, I didn't. I think a grey deck of cards just wouldn't have worked nearly as much as the sort of blood red we eventually went for. This is a concept art for the Joker, just sort of a no exit sign with a lot of white space. Again, not something I particularly liked. I think I much prefer the sort of Camp 52 logo, and the idea of Camp 52 sort of ran throughout this whole deck, so that is the sort of world that this deck of cards is set in. So in my case, it was all about world building and storytelling, not so much, you know, striking visuals, but more to do with the actual story behind it. And yeah, I could have gone for something a lot more mainstream, but I decided to go down the more sort of subtle route, and some people will get it, some people won't, and that's completely fine. I think if it's a design that everyone will love, then I think you're probably playing it too safe. That's just my personal opinion. Sometimes it's as simple as a dot, or a word, or a stripe. You know, it can be simple. I'm not saying it needs to be complicated, but it just needs to be an idea you believe in. That is really, that is the heart of it. So we have the ad cards. That's another idea that immediately came to mind. One of the first things I visualized was the back design, and then one of the next things was the Jokers and the ad cards. Throughout the design process, we didn't really have a color in mind, which is kind of interesting. We played around with colors as we went, but we didn't think that we'd land on dark red immediately. So for us, we sort of experimented along the design process. Another really interesting thing that I didn't think of at the start of this process, again just because I'm new to the world of designing cards, was the idea of a mood board. Now, I'd heard the expression mood board. A couple of designers had mentioned mood boards to me. I didn't really get what they were. I think I'd heard it in school when I did art and I wasn't entirely sure what a mood board was. Turns out it's really helpful actually. What it is just essentially putting together loads of images that are sort of to do with your deck of cards. So if, for instance, your deck, I don't know, I'm just coming up with a random idea here. If you want a purple flower on your deck of cards, then get loads of images of purple flowers. Get images of flowers that aren't purple. Get images of things that aren't flowers but are purple. You know, just sort of collect all these ideas and there might be something there. Not from one specific image, but from all of them together that just sort of leaps out at you, and it can act as some really good sort of inspiration. So yeah, I would definitely recommend a mood board. Just collect some images, collect some things together. Like for instance, just coming back to the dystopian deck, my experience of the mood board was looking at loads of different types of watchtower and looking at loads of different types of barbed wire. I didn't realise there were different types of barbed wire. I thought it was all just barbed wire. Turns out there's a lot of different types. And I sort of ended up becoming an expert in barbed wire because of that, just because you have to research and look at so many different things. And I know that sounds really boring, but again, if it's an idea you love, you're not really going to find it boring because you'll always have that end goal in mind. And for me, and for you in a deck of cards, the end goal is this. The end goal is being able to hold it and crack the cards open and look at them and spread them out. That will be an amazing feeling and an amazing achievement, so sort of keeping that in mind will get you over the tough hurdles. And yeah, it will be tough. There is no getting around that. There'll be points where the process is really getting you down and really, really tough, because creating a deck of cards is not an easy challenge. You have to create 52 pieces of art, and that's just the faces. Then you have to create a back design, then you have to create a box design, and then you have to get the look and the feel of the cards right. There's a lot of elements that go into it. It's not just going to be finished in an afternoon and sent to the printers and congrats, you've got a deck of cards. There's going to be some tough hurdles along the way, and that's just me being honest. I'm not trying to put you off. There were some points during the process of designing this where I wasn't sure if the deck was going to happen, just out of a sheer sense of, you know, it being overwhelming. And so the next piece of advice I have is to break it down into sections. You're not going to be able to do it all at once, so you need to break it up. What do you want to start with? Do you want to start with the back design? In which case, that is going to be your mission for the next month, 2 months, maybe a week if it's a simple back design. I don't think that's a bad thing if you take a short amount of time. It could be that other parts of the deck take longer than it did for us. I mean, for us personally, the back design was possibly the hardest thing to get right, but for you it might be the court cards or the Joker. Again, people will have different experiences. What I'm saying is break it down into chunks and don't set yourself a time limit. Don't be too harsh on yourself. There's no rush. In our case, we started with the back design because we knew that the back design was going to inspire the rest of the deck. The way it did that was when we eventually had the final back design after a lot of hard work, we knew that that red was so good we wanted to apply it to the red cards. So that red on the red cards instantly became the same colour scheme as the back design. So again, one thing will inspire another, and that will definitely happen in your deck. We also focused on every tiny little detail. And when I say we, by the way, I'm also talking about Arya, who is the co-designer. Go and follow him on Instagram, he's such a talented artist, and without him, this project simply would not have happened. So when I refer to we, I'm mainly referring to him. He did a lot of the design work here, so although I'm the one talking about it, I'm not taking credit for it at all. It is, I mean, his name is on the box just as much as mine is, so yeah, I know I'm here talking about it, but it's a co-project, so bear that in mind. But yeah, we focused on every tiny detail, right down to the size of things. Obviously I've spoken about the colour, but then we also really focused on the border, and the barbed wire had to be exactly right, the watchtowers. How big do we make those circles? We tried a few variations. We tried with extra items on the back design like stars and targets and peace symbols and all that sort of stuff. And in the end we just had to narrow it down, and the negative space, the sort of blank red space in the end looked really nice. But that wasn't the original intention. We were going to fill this up with sort of intricate detail. I think that would mean that the sort of watchtower design would get lost. We wanted that to be really, really striking. And then you'll also notice on the back design that the clouds aren't actually clouds. They don't have outlines. They're just made up of stripes. So then it was about the number of stripes and all that sort of stuff. And Arya did just a fantastic work on this back design. Arya, if you're watching, I mean, you know how much I appreciate it anyway because I've thanked you so much, but yeah, just a public thank you, because honestly, this is it's just really, really perfect. Thank you, Arya. So yeah, obviously once the back design was done, we moved on to the face cards. It was all about just meticulously going through the deck and going through the court cards and customizing them one by one. And this was a long process. And another thing I would say, if you're designing with someone else, is don't be afraid to say no. So if you're working with someone else, it's really, really important to make sure that that someone else gets your idea. Get someone who believes in your design as much as you do. And make sure they're as passionate as you are. But you also need someone who really understands playing cards, and I think that is so, so important. If you want to use court cards, then I'll link below Daniel Schneider's work. He's redesigned like the classic court cards to really high digital modern standards, and you can purchase that download pack, which is something really, really helpful. We used that as a basis, but ultimately ended up going down a custom route. It also just sort of shows you the layouts, the very, very specific layout for printing, which is an entirely different thing. I mean, the major sort of issue for us to overcome was the printing, because the printing standards need to be exactly correct. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a misprinted deck, and you don't want that unless it's done on purpose, obviously. So yeah, that is just so important to get right. If you get that wrong, you're going to be very, very disappointed and you'll have wasted your money. So make sure you've got the specifications, the exact things that you need if you want to print. And if you're unsure about those, contact your playing card company, be it USPCCCC or, or be it Cartamundi or whoever. Contact them and get some, previews of what you need to have. We had some major printing issues, which I've not spoken about yet, where the colour of the box just wasn't being accepted. No matter how many times we changed the file format or whatever, there was this technical issue where Cartamundi were just rejecting the colour of the box, even though it was the same as the colour as the back design. For some reason it was being rejected, and we were kind of getting worried that the deadline was approaching for the Kickstarter being launched and the prototypes still weren't printed, and that was, I don't know if it was our error or what it was, but eventually I contacted Cartamundi, they got it fixed, and ultimately, yeah, we did get the prototypes printed. So yeah, communicate with everyone, ask questions, don't be afraid. If you're new to the business like I was, it is not a bad thing to ask and just say, hey, listen, I don't understand this particular aspect of the design, can I talk to you about it? And most likely they'll say yes. Ultimately, they're human beings. And my person at Cartamundi, you get issued a person who will always be, in contact with you throughout your project. They were just so helpful. So Cartamundi, thank you. Honestly, a lifesaver. What next can I talk about? I mean, I've spoken about the design process and the ideas and so on. Printing obviously is a huge one. But what I will say is, have fun. Ultimately, this is a project that I'm sure you'll love working on. If you want to make a deck of cards, I think you totally should. I think you totally can. There's a lot of card people out there in the industry that say, oh, the industry's overcrowded, there's too many decks of cards. How can it be a bad thing that there are loads of decks of cards on sale? It doesn't mean that the industry is overcrowded or overcramped. It means the industry is growing, and that's a good thing. I've received some, I'm not gonna lie, I've received some messages from some people who I'm sure you'll be aware of. I'm not gonna name names, but I've received some messages saying that, we don't need my deck of cards on the market. There's too many playing cards as it is. And yeah, obviously those messages get you down a little bit, but I'm not letting it put me off, I think it's a good thing. Years ago, you had to be a big card company or a big magic company to print your own deck of cards. And isn't it brilliant that now just individuals can, and we can have so many different types of decks of cards through platforms like Kickstarter or GoFundMe or whatever that come to the market and just build on this huge community we have. I think it's brilliant. I love it. And now that I have sort of stepped into the card industry world, I don't know if the deck will be a success or what, but to even dip my toe in that, I feel is a great honor. And to those people that have tried to put me down and say that I can't do it and I shouldn't do it because the market's overcrowded, I say, no, I'm bringing the dystopian deck to the market, and thank you to everyone that has supported me. I really do appreciate it so much. Hopefully this will lead to great things, hopefully. So with all that being said, there we have just a few thoughts on designing my own deck of cards, and hopefully a few tips, a few little pointers for people that want to do what I do and set out building their own deck of cards. Entering the card community for the first time can be daunting, but if you want to talk about cards, if you want to talk about magic or ask me questions or whatever, I'll try and get back to as many emails as possible. I have a new email address, cavan@cvn.cards. That is such a cool email address, very happy with that. So yeah, I'm open to talk through there, and if you have any questions about card design in particular, following on from this video, I'll try and answer them as much as possible. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to click the thumbs up button down below. You can also subscribe to the channel if you are new, and yeah, I will see you in the next video.
I think you're gonna have to be gentle. We're gonna have to go very slow and soft.